the projector beam flickered across my slides as I stood before the investment panel, my voice steady despite the pressure. 3 months of research compressed into a 20-minute pitch. I was explaining our breakthrough when Marlo, my senior colleague, suddenly rose from her chair. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice carrying across the conference room. "But I can't sit here and watch this continue." Her perfectly manicured hand gestured toward my presentation. "This data is clearly manipulated." The room went silent. 7 potential investors stared at me, then at Marlo, then back at me. I felt my pulse in my fingertips. "I've reviewed the original research," Marlo continued, her tone shifting to something resembling concern. "These figures are inflated by at least 40%. The cellular regeneration rates shown here are simply not possible with our current methodology." My mouth went dry. I'd spent 18 months on this project. Every number on that screen represented countless hours in the lab, meticulous documentation, rigorous testing. "That's a serious accusation," I managed to say, gripping the edges of the podium. Marlo smiled thinly. "I know this is difficult to hear, but integrity matters in biotech. We can't promise investors something we can't deliver." Mrs. Kessler, the lead investor with steel gray hair and 30 years in pharmaceutical funding, studied me with sharp eyes. Then she stood up, adjusting her impeccable suit jacket. "Actually," she said, "can we speak with her alone?" Marlo's smile faltered. "I really think I should stay." That wasn't a suggestion. Mrs. Kessler's tone left no room for argument. "Everyone except her. Out. Now." The room cleared. Marlo shot me a final glance, equal parts warning and triumph, before pulling the door closed behind her. 7 investors. Me. The humming projector. My career hanging by a thread. Mrs. Kessler broke the silence. "Walk us through your research methodology. Every step." I swallowed hard. "Before I do, I want you to know, I would never. Just show us. From the beginning." So I did. I pulled up my raw data files, my testing protocols, my iteration logs. I explained the novel approach I'd developed during my research fellowship, how I'd adapted it to increase protein synthesis efficiency by redirecting cellular energy pathways. Mr. Abernathy, the venture capitalist known for backing 3 unicorn startups, removed his glasses. "These server timestamps, your colleague accessed your files repeatedly over the past month?" She said she wanted to verify my work before the presentation. "And did she suggest any changes to your approach?" "No, she just asked questions about the methodology." Mrs. Kessler exchanged glances with the others. "Show us the patent applications for this process." "I haven't filed yet. I was waiting until after this presentation." Mr. Abernathy tapped on his tablet, then turned it toward me. "Then perhaps you can explain this application submitted 9 days ago?" I stared at the screen. A patent filing for my exact methodology, with slightly reduced efficiency metrics. The inventor listed, Marlo Ingram. My stomach hollowed out. That's my research. "With one key difference," Mrs. Kessler noted. "The synthesis rates are precisely 40% lower than what you presented today." The realization hit me like physical weight. Marlo hadn't just tried to discredit me. She'd stolen my work, filed it under her name, then deliberately set me up to look like I was inflating numbers. "We need to speak with Miss Ingram again," Mrs. Kessler said. They called Marlo back in. She entered with the confident stride of someone who believed they'd already won, until she saw their expressions. "Miss Ingram," Mrs. Kessler began, "we've reviewed the patent application you filed last week." Marlo's expression remained neutral. "I'm not sure what." "The one where you claim to invent a cellular regeneration process identical to what we've just seen, except with figures exactly 40% lower than what your colleague presented." A moment of silence stretched between them. "Either her data is manipulated as you claim, Mrs. Kessler continued, in which case your patent application is based on fraudulent research, or her data is accurate, and you stole her work while attempting to discredit her. Which is it?" I watched Marlo calculate her options, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "This is clearly a misunderstanding. We've pulled the server access logs," Mr. Abernathy interrupted. "For 6 straight weeks, you accessed her research files minutes after she updated them." Something changed in Marlo's eyes then, the first flicker of real panic. She looked at me, and I saw the moment she realized I'd known. I'd watched her stealing my work, and said nothing. I'd let her build her own trap. "You knew," she whispered. The meeting ended quickly after that. Marlo was escorted from the building. The investment panel requested exclusive rights to my research. I signed the preliminary paperwork with steady hands. Before we continue with what happened next, I should introduce myself properly. If you're enjoying this story of workplace justice, please tap that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens when Marlo tries to salvage her reputation, or how I discovered she'd been doing this to researchers for years before me. My name is Dara, and until 18 months ago, I was a postdoctoral researcher specializing in regenerative medicine. I'd spent 4 years developing a theoretical framework for accelerating cellular repair through mitochondrial pathway modification. Important work, but largely academic, until a startup recruited me to adapt my research for commercial applications. The company was small but promising, 28 employees, 2 rounds of funding, and a brilliant but temperamental founder who rarely emerged from his lab. What they offered was the chance to see my work help actual patients. My first day, Marlo gave me the tour. Tall, poised, with the confident smile of someone who knew exactly where she belonged in the world. The founder might be the genius, she told me over lunch, but I'm the one who keeps this place running. Remember that, and we'll get along fine. I did remember. I watched how others deferred to her, how the administrative staff jumped when she appeared. She'd been there from the beginning. She had the founder's ear. She managed investor relations. And I saw something else too, how the research teams kept their distance, how they guarded their work, how 3 promising scientists had left in the past year alone. What happened to my predecessor? I asked a lab technician named Roni during my second week. Roni glanced around before answering. Quinn? She developed a promising delivery mechanism, presented it to the board. Then suddenly, there were concerns about her methodology. She was gone within a month. Who raised the concerns? Roni just looked at me, then changed the subject. I threw myself into my research. The company's existing regeneration protocols were effective but slow and expensive. My approach could potentially cut production time by 70% while improving cellular integrity. If successful, it would transform treatment possibilities for severe burn victims, organ transplant patients, and dozens of degenerative conditions. For 6 months, I encountered nothing but encouragement from Marlo. She approved my resource requests, extended my deadlines, praised my progress in team meetings. You're exactly what this company needed, she told me after I presented preliminary results. Keep this up, and you'll be heading your own division within a year. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Then came my breakthrough. After hundreds of test iterations, I identified the optimal sequence for redirecting cellular energy without compromising structural integrity. The results were better than I'd hoped. Regeneration rates increased by nearly 300% with minimal energy input. I scheduled a meeting with Marlo to share the findings. This is remarkable, she said, scrolling through my data. Truly groundbreaking. I think we're ready to present to investors, I said. The production implications alone could increase valuation by, not yet. Her response was immediate. These results need verification. Independent testing. We can't risk our reputation on preliminary findings, no matter how promising. That made sense. I agreed to additional testing protocols, even though they delayed the presentation by weeks. Let me help you refine the presentation, Marlo offered. I know what investors respond to. Again, I agreed. She'd been doing this for years. I trusted her guidance. That's when things began to shift. Marlo requested access to all my research files, not unusual for a senior team member providing oversight. But then equipment I needed became mysteriously unavailable. Key team meetings were rescheduled without notifying me. Administrative barriers appeared where none had existed before. I started paying closer attention to Marlo's movements. I noticed how often she accessed my files immediately after I updated them. How she scheduled meetings with the founder whenever I had significant breakthroughs. How she began subtly questioning my methodology in team discussions. I'm just playing devil's advocate, she would say with a smile. Investors will ask these questions too. 2 weeks before the presentation, she called me into her office. I need to see all your cultivation logs, she said. Every trial, every iteration. We need to make absolutely certain these results are reproducible before we present. I provided everything she asked for, but this time, I implemented a digital tracking system to monitor who accessed my files, when, and what they viewed. The pattern was unmistakable. For 6 straight weeks, Marlo had systematically reviewed and copied my research, focusing particularly on my methodological innovations. The frequency increased as the presentation date approached. 3 days before the presentation, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. A draft patent application on Marlo's cloud drive. My process, my wording, my diagrams, but with her name as the inventor. And with one critical modification, the regeneration rates were reduced by exactly 40%. That's when I understood her game completely. She would let me make my presentation. Then she would publicly question my results, claiming I had inflated the numbers. The investors would be concerned. They would compare my figures against industry standards, which Marlowe would provide. My credibility would be destroyed. She would step in with the accurate version of my research, the version she had already filed for patent protection. I had 24 hours to decide how to respond. I could have confronted Marlowe directly. I could have reported her to the founder. I could have withdrawn my presentation entirely. Instead, I did something much simpler. I did nothing. I let her believe her plan was working. I made no changes to my presentation. I didn't alert anyone to what I'd discovered. I continued preparing as if I suspected nothing. But I did make one small adjustment. I implemented a silent tracking system on all my research files. Every access, every download, every modification would be logged with timestamps, location data, and user identification. Not on the company servers, but to a private cloud account only I could access. The morning of the presentation, Marlowe stopped by my desk. "Nervous?" she asked, placing a hand on my shoulder. "A little," I admitted. "Don't be. You've done exceptional work." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just stick to the facts and you'll be fine." I nodded, wondering if she realized what she was doing. Not just to me, but to patients who might benefit from this research. Did she ever think about them? Or was advancement the only thing that mattered? You know what happened next. The presentation, her interruption, the accusation, the investors asking to speak with me alone, the discovery of her patent application. What you don't know is what happened after. The day following the disastrous presentation, the company was in chaos. Marlowe had been escorted from the building with her access revoked, but her influence remained. She'd been there from the beginning. She had allies, friends, people who couldn't believe she would do something so blatantly unethical. There must be some mistake. I overheard one lab director telling another. Marlowe built this place. She wouldn't risk everything on something so easily disproven. By mid-morning, I received an email from the founder requesting a meeting. Tad was a brilliant scientist, but an awkward communicator who preferred isolation to interaction. I'd met him exactly twice in 18 months. His office was unexpectedly austere. White walls, minimal furniture, no personal items except for a single framed photo of what appeared to be a research team from decades earlier. "Sit," he said without preamble. "Explain what happened." I walked him through everything. My research, Marlowe's gradual escalation, the patent theft, the public ambush. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he remained silent for nearly a full minute. "Why didn't you come to me when you discovered the patent application?" he finally asked. "Would you have believed me over Marlowe?" His silence was answer enough. "The investors want to move forward with your research," he said. "They're prepared to increase funding significantly if you can demonstrate reproducible results." "I can." "Good." He stood, signaling the meeting was over. "One more thing. Marlowe is claiming you sabotaged her, that you deliberately provided her with inflated data, knowing she would file it." I felt a chill. "That's not. I don't care what happened between you two," he interrupted. "I care about this company. Fix this. Make the research work. Prove the results are legitimate. Everything else is noise." As I turned to leave, he added, "Don't imagine this makes you untouchable. Everyone is replaceable." I walked back to my lab, his words echoing in my mind. I'd survived Marlowe's attempt to destroy my career, but I'd made powerful enemies in the process. The founder didn't care about justice. He cared about results. The investors cared about return on investment. I was valuable only as long as my research remained promising, and Marlowe was still out there. 3 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. "Coffee? We should talk." Against my better judgment, I agreed. The cafe was 2 miles from the office, a place I'd never been before. Marlowe was waiting at a corner table, looking remarkably composed for someone whose career had just imploded. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "What do you want?" "To understand." She studied me with genuine curiosity. "You knew what I was doing. You could have stopped me at any time. Instead, you let me walk right into it. Why?" I considered lying, but what was the point? Because if I'd confronted you privately, you would have denied everything. If I'd gone to Tad, you would have convinced him I was being paranoid. I needed you to expose yourself. She nodded slowly. Smart. Ruthless, but smart. She took a sip of her coffee. Did you know this wasn't my first time? I hadn't, but I wasn't surprised. Quinn had a similar breakthrough last year. So did Amit before her, and Jordan before him. She named my 3 predecessors. Each time, I refined my approach. Each time, I got a little better at making it look like their work was mine. Why are you telling me this? Because you're different. Something in her expression shifted. Not quite respect, but recognition. You saw the trap and used it against me. That's rare. Is this supposed to be a compliment? You stole my work? I'm offering you a partnership. I stared at her. You can't be serious. Think about it, Dara. Your research, my connections. The investors may have sided with you this time, but Tad resents the disruption. The board is split. Half of them still believe I was right about you. And the patent application with your name on it? She waved dismissively. A tactical error. We can fix that. We? I still have copies of everything. Your complete methodology. With my network, we could approach other investors. Start fresh. Split everything 50-50. The audacity was breathtaking. She had tried to destroy me professionally, and now she was proposing we become partners in stealing my own research. What happens if I say no? Her smile thinned. There are aspects of your research that won't hold up to intense scrutiny. Corners you cut, protocols you modified. Nothing fatal to your conclusions, but enough to raise serious questions about your methods. You're threatening me. I'm being practical. I have nothing left to lose. You have everything. I stood up, my coffee untouched. I'll think about it. Don't take too long, she called after me. My offer expires in 48 hours. I walked home instead of taking the bus, needing the time to think. Marlowe had just confirmed everything I'd suspected about my predecessors. She'd been systematically stealing research and pushing out promising scientists for years. Tad either didn't know or didn't care. The investors only cared about results. And now she was threatening to undermine my research if I didn't cooperate in stealing it. By the time I reached my apartment, I knew what I needed to do. I spent the night pulling together everything I had on Marlowe's activities. The access logs, the copied files, the pattern of researcher departures. I found contact information for Quinn, Amit, and Jordan. I drafted emails. The next morning, I received another message from Marlowe. Have you decided? I didn't respond. Instead, I went to the office early and requested a meeting with Mrs. Kessler, the lead investor. To my surprise, she agreed to see me that afternoon. Her office occupied the top floor of a downtown building with views of the harbor. Unlike Tad's sterile workspace, hers reflected decades in the industry. Awards, photographs with research pioneers, mementos from successful ventures. This is unusual, she said, gesturing for me to sit. We typically communicate through company channels. What I need to discuss doesn't concern the company. Not directly. Her eyebrows rose. I'm listening. I laid out everything. Marlowe's history of appropriating others' research, the pattern of promising scientists being pushed out, her attempt to blackmail me into partnership. Mrs. Kessler listened without interruption, her expression revealing nothing. This is a serious accusation, she said when I finished. It's not an accusation, it's information. What you do with it is your decision. And what exactly are you hoping I'll do? I want to continue my research without interference. I want credit for my work, and I want protection from Marlowe's threats. Mrs. Kessler studied me for a long moment. You know, when I first invested in this company, it wasn't because of the science, it was because of Marlowe, her ability to spot talent, to identify promising research directions, to package complex concepts for investors. I never questioned how she found these breakthroughs. She stood and walked to the window. How many others? She asked quietly. At least 3 that I know of. She turned back to me. Bring me proof. Not just access logs. I want testimony from the others. Evidence that establishes a pattern. Can you do that? I think so. I've already reached out to them. Good. Because if what you're saying is true, this goes beyond one researcher and one company. This is about scientific integrity, and that affects all of us. As I stood to leave, she added, Be careful, Dara. Marlowe didn't get where she is by being careless. If she senses you're building a case against her, she didn't need to finish the thought. I understood the risk perfectly. When I returned to my apartment that evening, my door was slightly ajar. I froze, keys in hand, heart hammering. I was certain I'd locked it that morning. Slowly, I pushed the door open. The lights were off, but I could see enough to know someone had been there. Cabinet doors stood open, papers scattered across the floor. My laptop was missing from the desk. A soft noise came from the bedroom, the sound of a drawer closing. Someone was still inside. I stood frozen in the doorway, my phone clutched in my hand. Someone was in my bedroom, likely searching through my things. My mind raced through options. Call the police? Run? Confront the intruder? Before I could decide, a figure stepped into the hallway. Not Marlowe, as I'd expected, but a man I'd never seen before, broad-shouldered with close-cropped hair and an expressionless face. "Who are you?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. He didn't answer. Instead, he held up my external hard drive, the one containing my backup files and tracking data. "Put that down," I said. "That's private property. Miss Ingram sends her regards." His voice was flat, professional. "She said you'd understand. I understand breaking and entering is a crime." He pocketed my hard drive and moved toward the door, toward me. I stepped aside instinctively. He paused as he passed. "Smart decision. Miss Ingram also said to tell you that your 48 hours are up. She'll be proceeding accordingly." After he left, I called the police, but I knew it was pointless. By the time they arrived 20 minutes later, the man would be long gone, and I had no proof connecting him to Marlowe. I reported the break-in, listed my stolen electronics, and avoided mentioning any suspicions about who might be responsible. The next morning, I arrived at work to find 6 researchers gathered around my workstation, expressions grim. "What's happening?" I asked, setting down my bag. Tad emerged from behind them. "Several concerning issues have been brought to my attention regarding your research protocols." My stomach tightened. "What issues?" "Allegations that certain results were selectively reported, that control samples were contaminated, that you manipulated testing conditions to achieve desired outcomes." Marlowe had moved faster than I'd anticipated. The stolen hard drive must have contained enough information for her to identify the experimental shortcuts I'd mentioned. Minor procedural modifications that hadn't affected the validity of my results but deviated from standard protocols. "Who made these allegations?" I asked, though I already knew. "That's not important," Tad said. "What matters is whether they're true." I looked at the assembled researchers. Some avoided my eyes. Others watched with undisguised curiosity. None offered support. "I modified some procedures to increase efficiency," I admitted. "But those modifications didn't compromise the results. I can prove it. You'll have that opportunity. The board has called for a complete review of your work. Until then, your lab access is restricted, and your research is on hold." Just like that, everything I'd fought for was in jeopardy. Marlowe had found my vulnerability and exploited it perfectly. She couldn't steal my research anymore, but she could still destroy it, and me in the process. I spent the next 3 days in a conference room, defending my methodology to a review panel. Without access to my complete files, many of which had been on the stolen hard drive, I struggled to reconstruct my reasoning for certain decisions. On the 4th day, as I was leaving the building, Mrs. Kessler called. "I've been hearing concerning reports about your research," she said without preamble. "Marlowe orchestrated this," I replied. "She broke into my apartment, stole my backup files, and used them to identify procedural modifications she could weaponize against me. That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." A pause. "Can you prove any of it?" I closed my eyes. "Not yet." "Then you need to focus on defending your research. If your results are valid, prove it. Everything else is secondary." After we hung up, I sat in my car, exhausted and defeated. Marlowe had outmaneuvered me at every turn. Even exposing her theft hadn't stopped her. It had only changed her tactics. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Green Harbor Coffee, 30 minutes. Come alone. Might help." I hesitated, wondering if it was another of Marlowe's traps, but I had nothing left to lose. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived. In the back corner sat a woman with short gray hair and glasses, nursing what looked like a green tea. She watched me approach without smiling. "You're Dara," she said. "And you are?" "Quinn Williams, your predecessor." My heart jumped. "You got my email." "Yes." Bit surprising to hear from someone in my old position. Even more surprising to learn Marlowe's still up to her old tricks. I sat down across from her. "Then you know why I reached out. You think I can help prove Marlowe stole your research, just like she stole mine. Can you?" Quinn studied me over her glasses. "What makes you think I kept any evidence?" "It's been over a year." "Because you're a scientist. Scientists document everything." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "Fair point." She reached into her bag and removed a flash drive, placing it between us. After Marlowe pushed me out, I spent months trying to figure out how she'd managed it. I tracked every file access, every email, every meeting. I built a complete timeline of how she systematically appropriated my work while setting me up to look incompetent. I stared at the flash drive. Why didn't you expose her? Who would believe me? I'd already been discredited. Besides, Marlo's smart. She never left a clear fingerprint, just patterns. Patterns that only become obvious when you compare multiple cases. Like mine, and Amit's, and Jordan's. Quinn nodded. Exactly. One researcher making accusations looks like sour grapes. 4 researchers with identical experiences and documentation? That's a pattern no one can ignore. Have you spoken with the others? Amit's on board. Jordan's harder to reach. She moved overseas after everything happened. But her partner still works in biotech. I've got a call with her tomorrow. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. What's on the drive? Everything I collected, plus a template for organizing your own evidence. The key is establishing the pattern across multiple researchers. Once we have that, we take it to someone with the power to act. Mrs. Kessler, I said immediately. She's already asking questions. Quinn's eyebrows rose. The lead investor? That's significant. She could actually make something happen. We spent the next 2 hours comparing notes, identifying patterns, and building a strategy. By the time we parted, I had a clear path forward, not just to save my research, but to stop Marlo permanently. Over the next week, Quinn, Amit, and I worked remotely to compile our evidence. Jordan eventually joined from overseas, providing additional documentation of Marlo's methods. Together, we constructed an airtight case showing how she had systematically stolen research from multiple scientists while creating conditions to discredit them if they resisted. Meanwhile, my review panel continued scrutinizing my work. Without my stolen files, I struggled to reconstruct certain aspects of my methodology. Rumors spread through the company that my breakthrough might be invalidated entirely. Then, late one evening as I was leaving the office, I received a call from Mrs. Kessler. My office, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., she said. Bring whatever evidence you've compiled against Marlo. Has something happened? Several things. Be there at 8. I arrived 15 minutes early, clutching a tablet containing our complete dossier on Marlo's activities. To my surprise, Mrs. Kessler wasn't alone. 2 other investors from the original presentation were there, along with a woman I didn't recognize wearing a suit that practically screamed corporate attorney. This is Miss Wheeler, Mrs. Kessler introduced her. She represents our investment group's legal interests. I nodded, suddenly nervous. Before we begin, I should inform you that we've been conducting our own investigation based on concerns raised during your presentation. Mrs. Kessler continued, what we've uncovered is disturbing. Miss Wheeler opened a folder. Financial audits reveal that Miss Ingram has been receiving consulting payments from 3 competing biotech firms over the past 4 years. During the same period, research developments from your company mysteriously appeared in their product pipelines. I blinked, trying to process this new information. She wasn't just stealing research for herself, she was selling it to competitors. It appears so, Mrs. Kessler confirmed. We've also identified unusual patent transfers that suggest she's been monetizing stolen intellectual property through shell entities. We're prepared to take legal action, Miss Wheeler added, but we need comprehensive evidence establishing a pattern of theft and sabotage. I placed my tablet on the table. I have that evidence right here, not just my case. 3 other researchers with identical experiences. For the next 2 hours, I walked them through our compiled documentation. Access logs showing Marlo systematically reviewing research files before breakthroughs were announced. Communication patterns revealing how she isolated promising researchers from company leadership. Patent applications filed strategically to preempt original researchers' claims. When I finished, Mrs. Kessler exchanged glances with her colleagues. This is exactly what we needed, she said. Miss Wheeler will contact each of the affected researchers to prepare formal statements. In the meantime, your research review is suspended, and your lab access is fully restored. What about Marlo? Mrs. Kessler's expression hardened. Leave Marlo to us. 3 days later, I received an unexpected email invitation. Board presentation, tomorrow, 10 a.m. Attendance mandatory. I arrived to find the conference room packed, the entire research staff, administrative team, and investment panel. At the front of the room stood Mrs. Kessler, flanked by Tad and Miss Wheeler, and seated alone at the far end of the table, Marlo. She looked composed but wary, her eyes tracking each person who entered. When she saw me, her expression didn't change, but her hands tightened slightly around her portfolio. Mrs. Kessler called the meeting to order. We've gathered everyone today to address a serious matter affecting this company's integrity, future, and legal standing. She nodded to Miss Wheeler, who activated the presentation screen. The first slide displayed a timeline spanning 4 years, marked with researcher departures, patent filings, and competitor product launches. For the past 4 years, this company has been systematically undermined from within. Mrs. Kessler continued, promising research has been stolen, talented scientists have been driven out, and intellectual property has been sold to competitors. Marlowe straightened in her chair. These accusations are not accusations, Miss Ingram. Facts. Documented, verified facts. The presentation continued, methodically laying out everything we had discovered, not just our research theft cases, but the financial connections to competing firms, the shell entities receiving patent royalties, the systematic sabotage of promising scientists. With each new revelation, Marlowe's composure cracked further. By the time Mrs. Kessler called me forward to present our collaborative findings, Marlowe's face had gone pale. Would you like to respond, Miss Ingram? Mrs. Kessler asked when we finished. Marlowe stood slowly. This is clearly a coordinated attack by disgruntled former employees who couldn't meet expectations. If you examine their claims individually, we have, Miss Wheeler interrupted, individually and collectively. The pattern is irrefutable. The board has voted unanimously, Mrs. Kessler announced. Miss Ingram's employment is terminated effective immediately. Criminal charges for intellectual property theft, corporate espionage, and wire fraud are being filed with the district attorney. Civil litigation to recover damages will commence next week. I watched Marlowe's face as her carefully constructed world collapsed. 4 years of manipulation and theft, exposed in a single morning, her reputation destroyed, her career over, possible prison time looming. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the moment she understood. Her own methods had been used against her. She had taught me exactly how to build a case no one could ignore by compiling overwhelming evidence and presenting it to the right people at the right time. As security arrived to escort her out, she paused beside my chair. You orchestrated this, she whispered. All of it. I met her gaze calmly. No, Marlowe, you did. I just connected the dots you left behind. The research breakthroughs continued. With Marlowe gone, our company culture transformed. Scientists collaborated openly. Ideas flowed freely. My regeneration therapy entered clinical trials 8 months later, showing promising results for burn victims and transplant patients. Quinn, Amit, and Jordan received formal acknowledgement of their contributions, along with financial settlements. I was appointed research director, with a mandate to foster transparency and collaboration. Sometimes I think about Marlowe, facing trial for dozens of counts of intellectual property theft and corporate espionage. I wonder if she understands yet that her greatest mistake wasn't stealing my research. It was teaching me exactly how to bring her down. The most effective revenge isn't about destruction. It's about justice, connecting victims, documenting patterns, and presenting the evidence so clearly that no one can ignore the truth. In the end, Marlowe wasn't destroyed by me or any single researcher she victimized. She was destroyed by the pattern of her own actions, finally made visible for everyone to see. If you've made it this far in my story, take a moment to like and subscribe. There's more to this corporate battle than I've shared today, including what happened when Marlowe's defense team tried to discredit our evidence in court, and how her network of industry accomplices began to unravel. Sometimes the most satisfying part of justice isn't the fall, but watching what happens after.